I did a book a few years ago called The Fight to Vote, which was really a history of all of this. And it is not really unusual that we're having this conversation. It's been the case that we've been debating how people vote and what it means from the beginning of the country. It's noteworthy that just last week, an NBC News poll showed for the first time that the state of American democracy was the #1 issue. And there have been some other polls that were similar. Some of that is a function of the January 6th committee and many other things. But there have been other times in the country's history where these kinds of issues have been what we fight about. It's often been very partisan, and that shouldn't be a surprise either. The book starts with the Declaration of Independence, which didn't just break with Great Britain, but which said that government was legitimate. It said only if it rests on the consent of the governed. And that was a radical idea at the time. And in that spring of 1776, as I mentioned before, only white men who owned property could vote. But the radical democratic, small d democratic ideals of the Declaration of Independence, as hypocritical as the people were, given that so many of them were enslavers, began to take on a life of its own. And in the new states, newly independent states, started writing constitutions. And in Pennsylvania, Benjamin Franklin wrote that state's new constitution. And the first thing they did was they eliminated the property requirement for voting so that poor and working class men of all races could vote. And Ben Franklin was asked why he did that. And he said, well, there's a man who owns a jackass. It's worth $50. So the man can vote. Then the jackass dies. The man is older, the man is wiser, but the jackass is dead, so the man cannot vote. So who, Ben Franklin asked, who really has the right to vote, the man or the jackass? Pretty good explanation. Up in Massachusetts, John Adams was writing their constitution that same spring of 1776. And he was urged, do the say, hey, why don't you do that thing they did down in Pennsylvania? And he take away the property requirement. He was aghast. He said, if we do that, women will demand the right to vote. Lads of 18 will demand the right to vote, and men who hath not a farthing to their name will think themselves worthy of an equal voice in government, and they will demand the right to vote. John Adams said, there will be no end of it. And of course, he was right. There is no end of it. That same fight between the democratizing impulse and those who, for whatever reason, would pull up the ladder. That's the fight we've been having ever since.